Hello and welcome to this guide for some basic movement and some go-to combos for Dante on the Dante mode. For the terms in this video such as baseline and infinite air to make sense, please watch my introductory video to Dante linked in the description below. This third part is really not what I just referred to as a go-to combo or a basic moveset for Dante, but rather the opposite. In this video we're going to add a lot of complicated stuff, such as incorporating the Trickster and Sword Master into the baseline combo, switching styles at the same time, jump cancelling back and forth on the enemy, and using all buttons, which means adding the guns to the combo sequence. We will, with the exception to some Sword Master moves with Sword Dante and the Cavaliere, pretty much use all the air moves the 6 weapons used here have. To beat and S-rank the Dante missions, and don't really need to use the advanced baseline though, not even at all. The practical use of playing Dante this way is very limited. The area of effect attacks, such as spamming the Cavaliere motorcycle charge and the cascade with the Kalina, combined with the safety of the Trickster moves to evade, and the safety of staying in the air with the baseline combo that evolves solely around the standard attack button, will carry you through Dante for the most part. The reason I advocate at least incorporating some of the more advanced stuff with Dante is that it's extremely satisfying and fun to do. There is really no other game where the combat system is this dynamic and deep, at least when it comes to Dante and his moves. You can rely on what I've showed you in the previous videos, such as the baseline, and just add the more advanced stuff when the battle is less hectic, such as when there is only a few enemy or one enemy left and you want to add some variation and more style. What I will demonstrate here is just as the standard baseline and infinite air combo sequence, just a lot more complicated and a lot more input heavy. This is the reason I call this an advanced baseline and not an advanced combo, because it builds off the infinite air trick in the slashing sequence for the standard baseline. Is just add a part before the slashing sequence and a Sword Master move to the infinite air combo. So first up we're going to add a Gunslinger and Trickster part before we do the slashing sequence with the baseline. So the first thing we're going to do is do a crystal with King Cerebus as a launcher and then trick up to the enemy and do a revolver like that. So crystal, Trickster, trick up into a revolver. And then we're gonna jump cancel the revolver like this. And again, crystal, Trickster, revolver, jump cancel. And then while we do the jump cancel with the revolver, we're gonna switch to Gunslinger at the same time like that. So crystal, Trickster, revolver, jump cancel, switch to Gunslinger as we're doing the jump cancel. And then when we have switched to Gunslinger, we're gonna do a rainstorm with Ebony and Ivory and jump cancel the rainstorm, just like we jump cancel the revolver. So trick up, crystal, revolver, jump cancel into Gunslinger, into rainstorm. And then I jump cancel the rainstorm like that. And then I jump cancel away from the enemy and shoot to keep the enemy in the air. You see here, I jump away from the enemy to keep the enemy in the air. And then I switch to Trickster while I shoot with Ebony and Ivory and trick back up to the enemy, like you're seeing here now. And then when we have tricked back to the enemy, we're gonna switch to Gunslinger and Kalina at the same time and fire a Gunslinger style button attack with Kalina like this, to get the enemy back up into the air. And then it's just a baseline from that after that. You're seeing here now. So after we've done the new Trickster and Gunslinger part, we're just going to continue with the baseline as usual until we get to the King Cerebus revolver jump cancel. Then we're going to switch to Sword Master, as you're going to see here now. And then do the style button with the King Cerebus and jump cancel it, like you just saw. Here it comes again. So I do the revolver, jump cancel the revolver, and do the switch to Sword Master and do the style button attack with King Cerebus. You have to do the jump cancel with both the revolver and the style button sword master attack pretty much immediately as you do the move, or else you will lose the same vertical and horizontal position as with the enemy. I tend to look at the Sword Master addition with the King Cerebus more as a part of the infinite air trick though, as you're seeing here. I'm just adding the Sword Master part after I do the revolver. And you can do this just to practice the input heavy part of the advanced baseline. Here I'm doing the same thing, but after I use Gunslinger I switch to Trickster, just to get used to switching to 3 different styles and doing the jump cancel and the style attack button at the same time. So now we have gone through all the new moves. That is the advanced baseline. It is the Gunslinger and Trickster part before the slashing sequence, and the Sword Master King Cerebus style attack at the end of the slashing sequence. So let's try to elaborate on how to chain together everything now into a flowing combo sequence. Just with the standard baseline, what is allowing it to flow like this and to stay in the air indefinitely is the jump cancel combined with the Kalina and Gunslinger attack. It is actually the same principle as with the standard baseline. I'm just adding complications before the Kalina and Gunslinger attack and the jump cancel. And the complications are the Gunslinger Trickster sequence before the slashing moves, and the Sword Master King Cerebus attack before the infinite air part. The key point when it comes to timing is that you are at the same vertical height as the enemy after you've launched the enemy with the Kalina. As you're seeing here, I can just use Rainstorm and the Kalina and Gunslinger attack just to stay in the air indefinitely. This is what allows infinite air. It's just the Kalina and part and jump cancel and timing that I do a revolver or Rainstorm or whatever when I am at the same vertical height as the enemy. So if we look at the actual combo now, you're gonna see here, after I do the new part, it's just the Kalina and Gunslinger launch into the standard baseline. And then after the Sword Master, the new Sword Master move, it's just a Kalina and launch back into the new part of the baseline. So before we get into a finisher, let's just repeat the whole sequence. You start off with a crystal launcher, trick up to the enemy, do a revolver, jump cancel the revolver. At the same time you jump cancel the revolver, switch to Gunslinger. Immediately use the Rainstorm Ebony and Ivory attack. Jump cancel the Rainstorm. When you jump cancel the Rainstorm, jump away from the enemy. Shoot 1 or 2 times with the Ebony and Ivory to keep the enemy in the air. Switch back to Trickster as you're shooting with the Ebony and Ivory and trick up towards the enemy. Switch to Gunslinger and Kalina Ann immediately after and at the same time. Launch the enemy with Kalina and Gunslinger attack and switch to Sword Dante, and there it's just into the standard slashing baseline from that. Then after the King Cerebus revolver jump cancel part of the baseline, switch to Sword Master, do the style button attack and jump cancel it, and make sure you press forward to get over the enemy and switch to Gunslinger and do the Kalina and launch attack back into the first part, which is switching to Ebony and Ivory and doing the Rainstorm. Like with the old baseline, you can end the combo at any time by doing a breaking instead of the high side when you get to the Cavaliere part, and then get the enemy on the ground and you can do a finisher. And what I'm doing here is I'm doing back plus Sword Master with Cavaliere to launch the enemy, and then I do 3 standard punches with Balrog to get the enemy back on the ground, and then I switch to Sword Master and do the Balrog Sword Master attack to fall the enemy down, and then I just punch until I ignite and do a real impact to finish the enemy off. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about the enemy devil trigger on Dante Must Die, as it can sometimes put a halt to doing the advanced infinite air teleporty stuff with Dante. The fact that the enemies get harder to launch up in the air and keep in the air as the devil trigger adds difficulty to the Dante Must Die missions with Dante, in my opinion. With Nero you can snatch an enemy up in the air an infinite amount of times, even though they have devil trigger, and you can stay in the air that way with Nero, which makes the Nero missions a lot easier and more fluent, in my opinion. As you're seeing here, I'm trying to do the first part of the advanced baseline on a devil triggered riot here, but neither the Ebony and Ivory shot to keep the riot in the air nor the Kalina and launch is working and keeping him in the air or getting him back up into the air. And here is the same thing with the devil triggered riot, and everything I'm doing is working. You see, I shoot to keep him in the air, I do the Kalina and launch to keep him in the air. I can just shoot with the Ebony and Ivory. No matter what move I do, he stays in the air. So it seems, at least on its face value, random whether you can keep the enemy in the air or launch on devil triggered enemy. My theory though is that the heavier or bigger enemies like the riots in the cases, they get a certain power armor damage threshold when they devil trigger that you have to overcome with attacks before you can launch them properly or keep them in the air with lighter attacks like the Ebony and Ivory regular shots. Because if you look at the lighter enemies like the Kalina here, they get harder to launch when they devil trigger, but once they are in the air, they stay in the air no matter what move you do. As you're seeing here, I have to do the crystal 2 times to launch him, but then once he's back up into the air, I can do whatever move to keep him in the air, even though he has devil trigger. And again, you see, he doesn't get launched immediately. But when I have launched him, I can just do whatever move to keep him in the air. And the same goes for the Scudo Angelo, which is also a lighter enemy. When you got him up in the air, you can do whatever to keep him in there. But it gets harder to launch, as the you see here, as with the Kalina, he doesn't get launched immediately. Unlike with Nero, you can just jump and wire snatch, and you get the enemy up into the air immediately and can just continue with the combo. And against the Antenora, the advanced baseline doesn't work at all, even though when the Antenora isn't devil trigger. As you're seeing here, I'm doing the first part of the advanced baseline, and then when I shoot with the Ebony and Ivory, he just falls to the ground even though he hasn't devil triggered. And the problem seems to be the Ebony and Ivory, because if you see, I launch him here and try to shoot to keep him in the air, but the Ebony and Ivory is not keeping him in the air, so I can't do the advanced baseline on the Antenora at all. And then when the Antenora devil triggers, like he has done now, nothing works on him. You can't keep him in the air at all. As you're seeing here, I'm doing the revolver. The launch doesn't even get him high enough. And then when it does, now, you see, the revolver is not keeping him in the air. And Nero has the same problem with the Antenoras. When they devil trigger, no matter what move you do with Nero, they will fall to the ground. However, the old baseline, or the standard baseline rather, does work on the Antenoras because it doesn't involve any Ebony and Ivory. So you can use the standard baseline against the Antenoras to keep them in the air and be safe until they devil trigger. Then you just trickster away from them and use the cascade in a group of them to finish them off. But in closing, to get back to what I mentioned in the beginning, the enemy devil trigger is what makes the advanced stuff with Dante not worth it in the end, or at least not as good in practicality as it is in theory. Trying to keep track of which enemies you have done enough damage to launch or be able to keep in the air in the heat of the battle just add more complications to an already difficult mode. It's so much easier just to spam Dante's OP area of effect moves such as the motorcycle charge or the cascade.